everyone, and welcome back to Auto Wisdom. Today we are sitting behind the wheel of a 2016 Mercedes-Benz C63S AMG. Now, in classic Auto Wisdom fashion, let's go ahead and give it a good pull, shall we? Oh yeah. This C63S AMG is powered by a 4-liter biturbo V8 engine. It is a hot V setup, similar to the BMW M6 that I reviewed last week, where you had the turbocharger sitting in between the cylinder banks, and it provides a hefty amount of power. 4 liters in displacement, it is wet sumped, it is codenamed the M177, and it outputs 503 horsepower and a healthy 510 pound-feet of torque. Now with this video, I want this to be not only a review of this C63S that is fairly comprehensive and mainly focusing on how this car drives, but also a celebration of the V8s on the AMGs. This powertrain is absolutely lovely, and as we know, Mercedes-Benz is going away with the V8 power plant on the C63 powered cars. The current or new generation C63S E-Performance now features a inline 4-cylinder turbocharged power plant that also now has hybrid electric assistance. And while there is no doubt that it is going to be faster, it is going to be a tech feast for any car enthusiast. One of the defining elements of any AMG product has always been the marvelous V8 engines that these cars have been equipped with. And this M177 engine is no exception. So, long live the V8 engines, and long live the C63S. Let's get into it. Today I've taken this car to Palomar Mountain in San Diego, California, which is a beautiful section of back roads that feature a lot of switchbacks, a lot of elevation changes, lots of corners, and I think it's a great environment to sort of test the canyon and street characteristics of this car. I wish I had a track to test it, but unfortunately that's just not the case. A lot of people were worried about the AMG going to a forced induction setup with its 4-liter biturbo engine, and they were worried that the AMG was going to lose soul, it was going to lose character, it was going to lose sound, right? And really, one of the best aspects about the M177 engine here is that the sound on it is fantastic. Even though it is turbocharged and you do lose a little bit of that immensely powerful character that the older naturally aspirated power plants had that were well over 6 liters in displacement, this 4-liter engine still has a really nice growl to it. And taking it here through these back roads, what I really enjoy is that there is a little bit of traditional turbo lag. You don't really get full beans until you are well into the RPM range of this car towards the top end, and in that sense it makes it feel more traditional and it gives it a slightly more motorsport oriented feel. Really do like the engine, and there is no shortage of power. I mean, it pulls very, very hard. Now, all that power is sent through this 7-speed MCT automatic transmission. It is not a dual clutch. It actually uses a startup wet clutch, and then I believe it has a planetary gear set. So it's more so along the lines of a torque converted automatic, and it provides relatively quick gear changes. However, it's not this car's strong suit, in my opinion, because when you compare it to the competition, such as with something like an F80 M3 that uses the M dual clutch transmission, the MDCT really blows it out of the water. This does provide quick gear changes, as I stated previously, but there is a little bit of delay with the paddle shifters, and you don't get a ton of responsiveness. Like, you don't get a lot of feedback when gear changes are happening with this car. In terms of suspension, we have a McPherson Strunt front end with aluminum multi-link in the rear, and it feels very good. Given this car's relatively hefty curb weight of around 3,900 pounds, I was expecting to feel it a lot more, This car doesn't really want to understeer, and I think part of that is credit to the good Michelin Pilot Supersport tires that we have, but taking it through these very intense switchbacks up here on Palomar Mountain, it feels very compliant. Now, I have the car in the race mode, which puts it into a dynamic traction setting. My God, this thing is so fast. It stiffens up the adaptive dampers as well. And you get such a great deal of confidence driving this car. I'm very impressed with the handling. Body roll is limited to a large degree as well. I'm not experiencing a ton of it through these corners, and I can really appreciate that out of an AMG product. The turn-in is so good. The steering is very, very sharp on this car. You don't get a ton of feedback. This uses an EPS power steering setup, but it's definitely not all that bad. I've experienced worse in BMWs and base model Mercedes-Benz cars. This is a delight to drive through these canyon roads. I'm pleasantly surprised. The transmission, again, just to touch on it a little bit more, I think it's one of the weaker points of this car. And I wish it just had more feedback with its gear changes. And in addition to that, I also wish it was a little bit snappier. There's a little too much delay between the time I hit the paddle and the time that I get a responsive gear change. Now, the gear changes themselves are very quick, and they do respond rapidly. When you look at the needle on the tachometer, it's flying up and down every time a gear change is occurring. But again, it's just more so that delay and then the lack of feel between each gear change that I'm not really a fan of. Now, I've just caught up with some traffic here, so I want to touch quickly on the interior of this car and just the overall sort of amenities that this car features. This interior is gorgeous to look at. From an aesthetic and design standpoint, there is an element of symmetry, of flowing design language that is present amongst this interior, and you have such a high quality use of proper materials, from Alcantara and suede to high quality Napa leather, textured wood grain trim, great alloys, especially where the door handles are, the window controls, the surround trim on the AC and aircon vents. It's all really fantastically done and dressed up very, very nicely. This interior is class leading, especially at the time in 2015 when this car was introduced. I think the interior is definitely superior to a lot of the competition during this era. When you look at the F80 M3, which also featured a nice interior, this is done up so nicely, and I think it's even better than the Audis. The only thing that I will say in regards to the interior, there are two things. One, the trim pieces in this car tend to creak and rattle quite a bit. Like when you press on them, it sounds like a plastic bag being crunched up almost. It's really not all that great, and that's just more so like a fit and finish issue, I guess. And it's not like you're really going to be pressing on the trim panels all that much, but I don't know if it's the adhesive that they use or if it's just parts that just don't fit very well into the interior molding of this car. But I do wish that the components in this interior felt a little bit more solid and didn't have as much of a cheap kind of rattly, crackly feel when you press on them, and they kind of feel plasticky almost. Otherwise, though, from an aesthetic standpoint, I love the interior of this car. The gauge cluster is analog. It is so easy to read. It is gorgeous to look at. The fonts, the coloring, the red needles on the tachometer and speedometer, and the use of that carbon fiber inlay in between both of the gauges of the speedometer and the tach look really, really sweet. That's a nice touch that they implemented into this car. I also do like the steering wheel. We have a great use of high quality Napa leather with Alcantara, where the 9 and 3 hand positioning is supposed to be, so you get excellent grip with it. Flat bottomed and minimal use of buttons, which I do like. You know, you have kind of the essentials, because this obviously is a Mercedes-Benz luxury car, but it's nothing that's overly done or that feels overwhelming on the steering wheel. And these paddle shifters feel phenomenal. Very high quality metal alloy trim. They have a nice thunk. They don't feel cheap at all, and they're beefy, and they help to aid in that responsiveness of those gear changes when you're driving this thing in manual mode. Now, in regards to the driving aspects of this car, I do wish, I understand that this is a Mercedes-Benz and it is first and foremost a luxury car. It is a luxury product, and that is what Mercedes-Benz is going to prioritize for their clients and their customer base. Now, given the fact that this is a relatively brutal AMG product with this 4-liter turbocharged power plant, I wish there was more sound and more oomph coming through the interior of this car. This specific example is not equipped with the AMG Performance or Sport exhaust, which is a bit of a bummer. I really wish it did have that, and I think it would help to sort of ease that complaint. But the interior in here is so quiet, it's so well insulated, it's almost a double-edged sword. On one hand, you get a lovely and comfortable, quiet interior that's great for daily driving, and when you have passengers, you're not going to be annoying them. But when you do want to drive this car spiritedly, you don't get a whole lot of that brutality coming through the interior from that engine. Now, you can rev this thing out all the way to 7,000 RPM, and it definitely sounds good. But with that being said, I wish it had more grunt and more noise coming through the cabin, maybe a little bit less sound insulation, or just go the aftermarket route and put a proper exhaust with some downpipes on this thing. That's probably what I would end up doing. Overall, just taking this car through these corners, again, I'm very pleasantly surprised and somewhat impressed with the handling of this car. I don't feel like it's as athletic as an F80 M3, mainly just because of the increased curb weight. You can feel it just a tad through these corners. Like, I feel like I can't carry as much speed as I would in an M3. But nonetheless, the difference seems to be fairly marginal, and just going through back roads, I don't really think you would notice it. I think you would probably only feel that deficiency on a racetrack. Power is sent through an electronically controlled limited slip rear differential, which has a very good ability to put the power down. I don't see the traction control light coming on very much in this car, and given the fact that it has over 500 horsepower, over 500 pound-feet of torque as well, it is quite impressive in the sense that you really feel like you can get this thing going. You're not really going to be interrupted by the traction control system constantly holding you back. That's something that's pretty awesome. In the M3, it's very easy to get the traction control system to step out, and I think part of that is because of this car's fantastic power delivery, which comes on much more through the top end of the power band as opposed to just giving you all the torque at the low RPM range. I do like this car overall. I think it can serve as a fantastic daily driver that can also double as a really fun canyon car, maybe an occasional track day as well if you're into that sort of thing. And I can't even imagine with a proper exhaust system how good this car would sound. I really wish it just had a little more anger and tone with the factory exhaust system, sport exhaust or not. But I think with some downpipes and a proper axle back system, you can get some really great sounds out of this thing. You also get a little bit of factory overrun, which I like. That's a nice touch on the decel when you let off the throttle. I think it's really a shame that the new AMG is going to be a 4-cylinder. I mean, I get the fact that it's just going to be faster in every single way possible. It's going to have all the electric motor tech paired with that 4-cylinder engine to produce like 700 horsepower and fill in torque gaps and probably handle even better than it should, given the fact that that car weighs like 4,600 pounds. But this V8 out of the C63 is so awesome. And when you get such a lovely powertrain, it just adds to the driving experience. It's like, do I need more power than this? I really don't. This 500 horsepower is more than enough. And you also get really good brakes with this car too. Very progressive braking feel out of those 6-piston front calipers, and then there's a single piston floating caliper in the rear. Just very, very impressive drivetrain qualities out of this car. So with all that being said, guys, I'm going to wrap this review up here. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found the video informative. I really wanted this to be, once again, somewhat of a celebration of this powertrain and celebrating the AMG V8s that have been used over the past few decades. And, it's a bit of a sad and sore time that the AMG is now moving to the turbocharged 4-cylinder, and now a BMW M with its 6-cylinder S58 power plant has more oomph and size to the engine compared to an AMG. What happened? How the tables have turned in this scenario. If you enjoyed, please feel free to give this video a thumbs up as well as subscribe to the channel if you are new here. And with that being said, I will catch you all in the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.